Hey, this is American Lonsdale fan. Haven't made a video in a while, and I know I said I would, so felt like the perfect time, especially since some of the news came out about the tragedy at the Wyoming Air Force Base involving the M18 pistol, which is essentially the Sig P320. And I thought I'd make a quick video and just talk about it. Got about a half hour before I have to go to work, and just chilling around here, so I figured I'd just take the time to put my 2 cents into it. In the last 2 years, I've essentially worked at an FFL, and for about the last almost 6 months, I've been a part of the management team at a local FFL and shooting range. So I get a different perspective on the whole Sig P320 controversy, and just wanted to share it, and it seemed like the perfect time. So first and foremost, my heart goes out, and God bless the family of the personnel who lost their lives at the Wyoming Air Force Base, especially considering it was a true tragedy. It was most likely a preventable tragedy one way or the other. So that comes first and foremost. Given the fact that I've been long retired from public service, and now I'm just working essentially as a salesperson, as well as a range associate, as well as a management of a firearms store, I wanted to give my take on what I've seen and what I've looked at. Something that I don't think a lot of other YouTubers have really talked about, so I wanted to put my 2 cents in. So I'm not going to talk about all the controversy and everything else that's happened, the history about it. There's plenty other channels who can do that far better. So quick disclaimer, as well as for the sake of transparency, no, I'm not a Sig fan. I don't own a Sig P320. I was a fan more of their older stuff that they made in the 80s, because I'm old enough to remember it. But no, I don't own a Sig. I don't know any SIGs, and I don't own specifically the 320. But being where I work, I have handled them, I've shot them, and so forth. Not a huge fan, and I just never got around to buying them. But this is still an objective perspective, because there's a lot of other pistols that I'm just not a fan of, but that doesn't mean I share the same opinion that I do of them as I do the Sig pistols. So yesterday I was off from work, and I happened to read about the tragedy at the Wyoming Air Force Base. And the first thing I did actually was I contacted my management team at the shooting range and store and said, what do you guys think? This is what's going on. Should we be concerned about it? Biggest thing is probably once the news spreads, you're going to have a lot of Sig owners of the P320 are going to try to sell us theirs, because we actually buy used firearms. Should we buy them? Because we know the price could likely drop, as well as stock could drop, Sig stock could drop. Do we even take that risk of buying them, not only financially, but even for the sake of liability? And then of course we have, being that we are a shooting range, we have a number of rental guns, including the Sig P320. So should we pull them from the shelves? So that opened a whole hornet's nest, and my management team agreed that yeah, we should take it seriously. And it got me thinking about my something that I always noticed about the Sig P320. So let's talk about this. So in the myriad of different firearms out there, whether it's Walther, Smith & Wesson, Canik, you name it, you have a striker-fired pistol, and what is universal is some kind of safety block, something that's blocking the striker and firing pin from touching the chambered bullet in the chamber. And the block is almost universally, with few exceptions, and there's only two that I can really think of off the top of my head. All the designs are basically, what blocks that striker is going to be a cylindrical shaped steel piece that is blocking the firing pin from moving forward. Think of when you open up or field strip your Glock, your Smith & Wesson, all of those. That's what it looks like. There's a solid cylindrical piece of steel that is blocking that striker, that firing pin. And that cylindrical piece is being held by a coil spring that is pushing down. And then the only way that cylinder is moved is when you pull the trigger, and that frees it up so that the striker can now fire. Okay. There are two exceptions that I've seen, just like I said, off the top of my head. One is the H&K for the like the VP9 and so forth, where in their case it's a whole hinge group. It's a huge piece that's bigger than the firing pin that actually blocks it off. That's another story. It seems to be a very, very sound design. And the other is the Sig P320. What the 320 has is this really thin piece of metal. It's questionable whether it's really steel. In fact, there's been an argument that it's just been MIM parts and so forth, but I don't know. Either way, it's a thin piece of metal pushed on by a leaf spring, and that's the only thing that is blocking the striker. I kind of question it, especially because when Sig went to create the 365, they did away with that system and instead went to a cylindrical piece of steel that is actually blocking it with a coil spring. So I question that design anyway, but I'll give it its due. There's two other things to the 320 design that always kind of bothered me as a salesperson and stuff, especially when new customers would ask about it. And that is, there's obviously no trigger safety. I'm not discussing manual safeties or anything, but just in terms of there's no trigger safety on the 320, and the travel distance for the trigger is very minimal. It's that of a single action auto or revolver. Now, some defenders are going to say you don't need a trigger safety on the front, because it's not necessary. There's no need to get that trigger finger to get a full purchase on the trigger. You just need to keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire, and the travel distance makes the trigger pull a lot nicer. Maybe. Well, here's my argument. I'm a long time fan of the 1911, but let me make this argument. Would even the diehard fan of a 1911 feel safe if, let's say, Colt came out with a new pistol, 1911, 80 series with the one that blocks the firing pin, so 80 series pistol, but it had no grip safety and no manual safety and the same amount of trigger travel? Would you feel safe? Because after all, the gun is not going to go off until you actually pull the trigger, just like a Sig 320. Would you feel safe in carrying that? I'm willing to bet the answer is no. And it's not so much is the gun unsafe, at least on paper. It's the fact that it doesn't leave any room for error. There's so many things that could go wrong, and it wouldn't take much to have an accidental discharge. That's my argument with the 320, is with that trigger distance, remember it's got no take up like say a Glock or whatever. There's no take up until you hit that sear. There's just a bare minimum, and then it goes off. With that, and with the fact there's no trigger safety, and then in my opinion, the questionable striker block, is that a safe design? Well, on paper, yes, because yes, supposedly the gun will not fire until the trigger is pulled. But here's the point. We're all human. We all make mistakes. There's a reason we follow the 4 universal rules of gun safety, but we're human. We all make mistakes. We've all had little blips. Even if it's a split second, we've made a mistake with a firearm. When we consciously think about following all 4 of them, that allows for a margin of error. And I think that's the biggest thing about the Sig 320. There's no margin for error, at the very least. I think that Sig is, at the very least, reckless and careless as a company. They made a design that led no margin for error and forgot the human factor in creating a firearm. That yes, on paper, mechanically, it looked like it was a sound design, it was safe in theory, but in practice, with the human element thrown in, it is potentially unsafe. And I think that was kind of reckless on them because, after all, they are a firearms company with a compliance and legal team who should have been able to look at it and say, this might be a problem, especially since we're so apt to get military, police contracts, and get the civilian market as well. I think that was a little reckless on their part. I don't think they thought it through. And then their aggressive counter arguments and PR campaign, instead of being diplomatic for every time there was an issue with the Sig, and there's been a lot, Sig's answer was, instead of being diplomatic, oh, we take this very seriously. We promise to put our full resources into looking into this situation and addressing it, and so on and so forth. They just swept everything up the rug or got aggressive in saying, no, it's your fault. Well, now it's somebody has died because of it. Granted, we don't know all the details about what happened in the Wyoming base, but it does raise extra questions, and it's kind of that final straw, if you will, over a long period of problems with the 320. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Nothing more on it to say. Just thought I'd add my 2 cents on it, and it should be a lesson not only for other gun companies to not follow in Sig's mistakes, in my opinion, but also for all of us in the 280 community to be a little more cautious. And we love to get all excited about the latest products, and sometimes we should step back and look at them from a more rational perspective. But anyway, that's all I got. God bless you and those you love.